Out of the few releases I've made up to this point, Out of the Blue is probably up there with being one of the most important. Not only was it my first venture as a solo act, it was also the first time I had to approach an album with a different mindset. A few of the songs on there I'd actually written after Christie Row finished recording Headlights at Midnight, so there's a very good possibility that some of the songs could have easily ended up on the second Christie Row release. So in 2015, Jim Adkins, the singer and guitar player from Jimmy Eat World, released a series of singles as a solo act. He also went on tour and would be visiting the Courtiers Theatre in Glasgow. Fortunately, I happened to be on holiday that week and managed to pick up a last-minute ticket. So I drove down to Glasgow, arrived at the venue and watched at the front of the stage as to how Jim had the whole audience in the palm of his hand.
I promised I'd see you again. I promised I'd see this with you now.
You could hear a pin drop in that place. That night would change everything for me. I remember leaving the venue after it had finished and felt so inspired to start writing. In fact, I wrote the chorus for the song Waiting while driving home that very night. It was like midnight and here I was driving past Stirling and this chorus just came out.
I will keep waiting, waiting, waiting for
The months leading to the end of 2015 were not particularly great for me. There's no way of sugarcoating it. There was loads of things going on that I just felt that I needed to step back from, and unfortunately Christie Row was one of those things. I just felt like I needed to try something totally different and something that was going to take me even further out of my comfort zone. I had a few songs written and would take inspiration from what Jim had done and would try my hand as a solo act. I was kind of in the same situation as I was when we started work on Headlights at Midnight. I needed a drummer. So I invited my good friend Jack Nicholson to handle drumming duties on these new songs. So I carried on writing until I had enough material and we'd meet up with Jack and we would practice these songs, talking about the drums and fleshing them out. It was a very creative time, that's for sure. It was also in the run-up before heading back to Unity. I played my first solo acoustic show at the Plainstones in Elgin Town Centre. I also realised that this was a new chapter in my musical journey, so I wanted to kind of acknowledge that in some way, and I wanted to start with this one song. It's a Jimmy Eat World song called Lucky Denver Mint, and the main reason I wanted to start this gig with that song was for the first line, which happens to be So in April 2016, myself and Jack went through to Unity Recording Studio to record what would become Out of the Blue. First day in the studio, let's see how this goes. Again, with Joe Harfield, who spearheaded the Christie Row project. This is Joe, say hi Joe.
Hi Joe.
Hi Joe. It was an absolute blast working with Jack, as he has a great instinct and intuition as to what the drums could or should sound like. He's also not shy in offering up his input. Up to that point, I'd played a few gigs with Jack for a few years, so I knew that the drums would be very much in good hands. How's the first day going, Jack?
Slower than I thought. Good.
Songs can often and will change and expand. For example, the track now known as Jackson, we didn't even have a title for. After we recorded it, as a thank you to Jack for his help, I asked him to name the song. And as anyone else would do, he decided to name it after himself. So it was called Jack's Song. And I will be honest, when submitting the artwork, I made a typo, so it's now called Jackson. But we now know he named it after himself. But to be fair, some of the names that he did want to call it are probably better left unsaid. Tracks such as Waiting and This Time and The Change were not too dissimilar from the style and music Christie Row had produced. However, songs like Jackson, Stay With Me and especially Go On, I would like to think showcase a different side to my songwriting. I had recorded little snippets of what the song would go like, different parts would be, and at least then it would give Jack some kind of indication as to where my thinking was. From a stylistic point of view, it's very different to anything I had done in the past. Vocal takes can take a while to get right in the studio, and I for one am not ashamed to say that when recording them, especially with this album, it took me a while to get a take that I was happy with. Waiting was the last song we tried to record vocals for, and it proved just too much for me. When I practiced the song, it was fine. I could hit the vocals no problem. Sometimes you'll get thrown a curveball, and no matter how many times you have practiced, it might not go your way. And Waiting for me was the song that showed me that. This was also the first time that Joe introduced me how to harmonise vocals. He was great. If you hear them, especially in Jackson, that was all Joe's input. I always had a feeling that Stay With Me would be the first single to be released from this record. There was just something about the simple chord progression, the rolling bass lines, and the drums that just seemed to scream to me to be the first single. For a while I had this idea to have a dancer in a music video. When I began thinking about which song I could use this idea for, Stay With Me seemed the ideal fit. I invited my friend Anna McPherson of Recite Films to shoot the music video, and my very talented cousin, Kizzy Pink Simpson, to be the main dancer, with her sister and my other very talented cousin Holly handling choreography. We filmed in 2 separate locations, and everyone involved did an absolutely fantastic job, and I genuinely feel it is one of my favourite videos I've released. Everyone was on the same page and gave it their all, and it was an absolute joy to work on. Out of the Blue was mixed and mastered by James Gray, who mixed Headlights at Midnight, and was finally released on September 7th, 2016. And received great reviews, as well as worldwide radio airplay. Jackson and Stay With Me in particular were even picked up by a New York-based record label, who released the tracks on 2 separate compilation albums. The album title is literal. I didn't know what was going to happen after leaving Christie Row. Everything just happened so fast in that 5 to 6 month time frame that it only felt right to acknowledge it in some way, so that's why it's called Out of the Blue. I was incredibly nervous about releasing these songs, as I wasn't sure how anyone would react. Like I said, it is probably the most important collection of songs in my discography. This album was the one that proved to me that I could potentially carry on as a solo act. Afterwards though, another question began to appear. Where do I go from here?
Tell me where